Hey everybody, Reaper here again with another video, another discussion video. Today I want to talk a little bit about what are some defects I simply cannot stand. And I open that question up to you as well as I talk about it, as you think about it, as I go along with this video. Now, there are a few that you have heard me, if anybody has watched this channel over the period of, what is it now? Pretty soon, this is May, June 2022. I've been on YouTube now for about 8 years, come this summer. So over that time, for anybody that's been with me that long or half that length, you know that there are several defects that I don't like. And I'll talk about the one that's most obvious first, and then I'll get into a couple others before I close up the video. So, defects on comics that I simply cannot stand. The first one, the one that everyone I think knows what I'm about to say for anybody that's watched my channel, rusted staples. I don't like rusted staples for probably the same reasons you don't like rusted staples. It only gets worse, you know. I mean, albeit that but let me back up a bit. I don't like rusted staples. It always gets worse. It does take a while for the rusted staple to get worse. It takes a while for the rusted staple, the rust, to migrate to the paper, where it starts to stain the paper, where it starts to weaken the paper, where the paper will rip, the paper will tear, the cover will pop at the staple, or the centerfold will pop. Things of that nature. It does take a while for that to happen, depending on the storage, the environment in which the book with the rust on the staple or rust on the staples is located. Now, I live presently, because me and my wife are always talking about moving, and eventually I think we are going to move. But presently, right now, we live in New Jersey, so we don't really have too many climate problems when it comes to rust or affecting the hobby, affecting my comics. It's just, the books are stored in a very dry place. They're not stored where moisture could get at them. They're not stored in a place where there's high humidity or anything like that. And like I said, I live in New Jersey. We don't really have too many problems when it comes to those sort of temperature things, as other states in the United States have, like Florida. Now, some of you out there may indeed be from Florida, and you may be saying to yourself, well, I don't have that much of a problem storing my books. I don't have that much of a problem when it comes to rust on the staples, and that's great. But it can be a problem in certain areas where there's high humidity, where there's a lot of moisture in the air. And if you have a rusted staple in those areas, it might speed up the problem a little faster than it would someplace else, right? So all of that aside, I typically don't like rusted staples. Now, there are times though where a staple might have a little bit of rust on it where I don't care that much because it's not that bad, and doesn't look like it's getting worse. And like I just said, it may take a very long time, depending on how the book is stored. It may take a very long time for that rust to get worse. It may take a very long time for that rust to migrate to the paper, to where it's not really that much of a big deal. But usually, most of the time, when I see something that has rust on the staples, I don't like that. I really don't like that defect. There are many other defects out there when it comes to books we're all familiar with, when it comes to page, cover long creases or color breaking creases or slight tears or pieces missing from the book, whatever it is. We all have our issues. We all have our pet peeves. We all have the things that we really don't like when it comes to these sort of defects. And, rusted staples, I think, does take the top spot for me. But now, that's the one that I think everyone knows. Anybody who's watched my channel, that's something I probably would have said. So like, oh, why make this video if you're just going to say it again? Well, a lot of times I like to sum up things, but there are other things that I wanted to talk about, other defects, two other defects that I really don't like. And as I've been looking at some books, looking at books for sale, all of these different things, and okay, watch out for rusted staples. But there's another defect that I really don't like, and I find myself really surprised that I'm saying this. It's almost, to me, just as bad as a rusted staple, maybe even worse than a rusted staple. I mean, when I say rusted staple, I mean with a little bit of rust on the staple. I don't mean like something where it's completely rusted. I'll give you a quick example of that. Years ago, I had this book. It was a Strange Tales 126, First Dormammu, low-grade copy, heavy rust on the staple. As soon as I opened it, the staple just popped right out and left like a little hole the size of a staple all the way through the book. The rust was that bad. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about regular rust. But something that recently I'm starting to think more about, to look a little bit more negatively on spine splits. I really don't like spine splits. Now, sometimes there's a spine split somewhere in the middle of the book that doesn't really get to the staple, doesn't make the issue of the cover being detached. It doesn't create an issue where the cover will be detached or anything like that. I don't know how the hell that happens. But usually what I mean by spine splits are the ones that are at the top, the bottom, that are more than an inch and a half, that cuts through the staple to where you open up the book, that part of the cover flaps, because it's completely split on that end. I can't stand that. And like I said, as I was saying a few moments ago, that's almost taking the top spot over the rusted staple. For all the things that I've said about the rusty staples, I can't stand spine splits. I just can't stand them. A small little spine split, no big deal. An inch and a half, it starts to get really annoying. And I'll give you two examples before I go to the final thing. I mean, there's plenty of things I don't like, but I just wanted to narrow it down to maybe 3 things that I think we could all talk about in the comments and really get some feedback on or your thoughts on. 2 examples. I think it was about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago. I ordered a Vault of Horror. It was Vault of Horror number 36. It was that, I think it was the opium issue. I think that's 36. Anyway, I ordered it from one of my favorite sellers, and I mentioned him before. I like him, but sometimes he can't grade worth a shit. And he had it listed as a 4.5. Well, 4.5, it's right up my alley when it comes to those books. I usually don't, I have books, pre-code books, the EC books higher than that, but I usually don't go for those because of price and other things. So 4.5 is perfect. And that's probably going to be another discussion issue when it comes to 4.5. But I'll save that for another discussion. But anyway, he has it listed at 4.5, so okay, fine. I get it. And it had spine splits all over the place. And a spine split on top, a spine split on the bottom that went to the staples. It had a spine split in the middle. It was like somebody took a knife, like when you open up a letter and you don't have a knife, you have a letter opener. Almost looks like a knife. You slip it through the slot and you slide it up and it does a clean cut. So you just slip the letter out instead of destroying the envelope. It looked like someone used something like that and was just making spine splits to it. And I'm saying to myself, how the hell did you in your many years of being in business think that this was a 4.5? How? And I was like, I immediately returned it. I'm just like, oh, it just drives me crazy. That, if the book would have came with a little bit of rust on it, I wouldn't have returned it. I probably would have kept it. Like I said, as long as it wasn't that Strange Tales 126 type of rust, or where it's page after page after page, the migration. A little bit, I'm like, well, that's not so bad. I would have been okay with it, because I keep the book okay, and that's the end of it. But spine splits, just horrible. That was one example. Another example came, I mentioned it in my recent comic book haul with the Haunt of Fear 24. Same seller. Spine split, not mentioned. Higher grade than what it actually was. And I was like, this just sucks. There's nothing, to me, you could open up a book that has a spine split, as long as it's a little minor one, like this big at the top or the bottom, it's no big deal. You know, it's okay. Yeah, I mean, of course you have to be careful, but it's no big deal. But when you have a spine split that's an inch or an inch more from either the top or the bottom going up to the staple, you have to really be careful, because the way the paper might accidentally fold, it might tear a little bit more. It might just detach the cover at one of the staples or part of the cover or whatever it is. You really have to be careful. That's not a book that you can open up over and over again. Now, not that I'm opening up my books every day or a lot of the times, I'm not. But at least I like to have the option of opening up my book without it falling apart, without it actually being a complete piece of shit. You know? And spine splits have really been starting to bug me. Maybe it was because of those last two events, and I haven't bought anything since from that. I'm cautious. Oh, 4.0. 2.5, you mean. It just drives me crazy. It just drives me crazy. And the last one, as you can tell, I really don't like spine splits now. I think everyone was expecting me just to rant about rusty staples. Well, I've done that in the past many times, and like I said, well, they're still bad, but it's not bothering me as much. The last one is a detached cover. Now, I don't necessarily mind a detached centerfold at one staple as much. I don't like it. You know, like I said, you open it up and you get to the centerfold and you keep opening it. It's could potentially put more stress on the bottom staple and start damaging that, when you're opening up and flipping through it. I like to be able to flip through my books with relative ease and care, but relative ease without worrying about something becoming detached, Detached cover. I really don't like detached covers, even at one staple. I mean, there are some books in my collection, there's no doubt, that have that issue. My X-Men #1, it's a 3.0, it's attached at the top staple. As lucky as I am to have a 3.0, it still drives me crazy. I just can't stand it. We'll say, well, why did you buy it? Well, I didn't know it was detached at the time. And for what I paid for it back then, this was before X-Men #1 exploded, it wasn't a big deal. And I always thought, well, I'll just replace it. Well, now it seems like replacing it with a 4.0 might be a little more difficult. Not impossible, but a little more difficult. But I'm extra careful when I buy books to make sure that they're not detached at the staple of any the covers, because I really don't like those. I don't necessarily hate them as much as the other things that I mentioned, but they do bother me. They bother me a lot. They just do. So those are 3 things that really bother me. Things that I just simply can't stand when it comes to defects on comics. So in the comments, tell me what are some defects or a defect that you really can't stand. I mean, I know some of you might say, oh, restoration, all that stuff. I'm not talking about restoration. I'm talking about other things. I know some people, they don't like spine ticks, especially when it's on a very black cover. Some people don't like dog ears on their books or chunks missing from their books, and I don't like that either. There's many things I don't like, but I wanted to talk about the 3 that really stuck out for me, the ones that really make me go, I gotta upgrade this book. So what about you? Talk about it. Mention it in the comments. Thank you for watching, everybody, and take care.